Okay, let's talk about that horrible, sinking feeling in your stomach when you realize you've missed a required minimum distribution from your retirement account. It's a moment nobody wants to experience. But here's the good news. That anxiety can be replaced with a clear, actionable plan. The IRS itself actually provides a specific roadmap to navigate this, and today we're going to walk through it, step by step.
So what's the big deal? Well, this is 25%. That's the potential penalty for a missed RMD. That is a huge hit. It's an excise tax on the amount you were supposed to withdraw. But, and this is important, don't panic. Knowing what's at stake is actually the first step to figuring out how to get around it.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down that 25% penalty. Then we'll get to the good stuff, your Lifeline, which is the reasonable cause waiver. From there, we'll get super practical. How to build your case, how to actually fill out the forms, and maybe most importantly, what common mistakes to avoid. This is your path from problem to solution.
Okay, let's dive into section 1. Before you can figure out how to get a penalty waived, you've got to understand exactly what you're up against. So let's talk about what's really at stake here. Just a super quick refresher for everyone. An RMD is basically the IRS's way of saying, hey, you can't just keep your money in those tax-deferred retirement accounts forever, like a traditional IRA or 401k. Once you hit age 73, you generally have to start taking some of that money out each year. Why? So the government can finally get its tax revenue on that money. And this isn't just some suggestion, it is the law. It's written right there in Internal Revenue Code section 4974. If you don't take out your full RMD for the year, you could face a 25% excise tax on the shortfall. So, to put that in real numbers, if your RMD was $20,000 and you took nothing, you could owe a $5,000 penalty. Ouch, that is definitely not just a slap on the wrist. But wait, that 25% isn't always set in stone. Thanks to the Secure 2.0 Act, there's a bit of a lifeline. If you catch your mistake and fix it within a specific correction window, which is generally before the IRS sends you a formal notice, that penalty can actually be cut all the way down to just 10%. So moving fast is critical. But what if you could get it to 0? And that brings us to the core strategy and really the heart of this whole thing. Let's talk about your Lifeline, the reasonable cause waiver. This is the official IRS-approved escape hatch to get that penalty completely forgiven. And look, this is not some sneaky, hidden loophole you're trying to exploit. It's written directly into the tax code. The law itself gives the IRS the authority to waive the penalty if you can prove 2 key things. And these 2 things are the pillars of any successful waiver request. Think of your request like a 2-legged stool. It needs both legs to stand up. First, you have to prove the mistake was a reasonable error, that it happened for a legitimate reason and you didn't just ignore it. Second, you have to show you're taking reasonable steps to remedy it. In plain English, that just means you took out that missed RMD as soon as you realized the mistake. You absolutely have to do both. Okay, so that term reasonable error sounds a little vague, right? How do you actually prove it? Well, that's what this section is all about, the practical steps of building a convincing case for the IRS. These are some of the most common and most effective arguments that the IRS will actually listen to. Things like a serious illness, an error made by your bank or financial advisor, a major life event like the death of a family member, or even just being confused by all the recent changes to the RMD rules. Any of these could be a valid reasonable cause. The key is to find the one that fits your situation and then get the proof to back it up. You have to think like a detective here. Some experts call it a forensic approach, and I love that term. You're not just writing an apology letter, you are building a case. Your goal is to create a timeline of events, supported by hard evidence, that tells a clear and compelling story to the IRS. The strength of your entire waiver request is directly tied to the quality of your proof, period. We're talking about doctor's notes for a medical issue, emails that prove you got bad advice, or even sworn statements, affidavits from family members. All of this is what turns a weak excuse into a verifiable narrative. Okay, so you've built your case, you've gathered your evidence. Now it's time to execute. Let's walk through the actual paperwork. The key document you'll need is IRS Form 5329. Honestly, it really boils down to 3 simple steps. First, and this is totally non-negotiable, you must take out the money you missed. This shows the IRS you're serious about fixing the error. Second, you complete the right section of Form 5329. And third, you attach your letter of explanation, which is where you lay out that whole forensic case we just talked about.
So here's a quick look at the most important part of the form, Part 9. On line 52, you'll put what your RMD should have been. Line 53 is what you actually took, which might be 0. But the crucial part is line 55. Here, you enter 0 for the tax. And right on the line, you write RC, which stands for reasonable cause, and the amount you're asking to be waived. This is how you officially tell the IRS, hey, I'm requesting a waiver and I'm not paying the penalty.
I can't stress this enough. The form itself is just the beginning. Your letter of explanation is where you really make your argument. This is your chance to speak directly to the IRS agent who's reviewing your case. It needs to be clear, concise, and compelling, walking them through your story and pointing to all the evidence you've gathered.
And finally, let's cover the traps. Knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. These are the common pitfalls that can get a waiver request denied in a hurry.
So, a question I hear all the time is this: what if I just didn't have the liquid cash to take the RMD? It seems like a perfectly reasonable cause, doesn't it?
Well, this is what's known as the Liquidity Crisis Paradox. And it's tricky because while it feels like a valid reason, this argument is rarely enough on its own. The IRS is going to scrutinize your entire financial picture. If you had other assets you could have sold or used, they probably won't see this as a sufficient excuse. You'd need extensive proof that you truly had no other options available.
What other pitfalls are there? Oh, plenty. First, relying only on tax software. It just can't capture the nuance of your personal story. Another big one is filing the form but forgetting to attach that crucial letter of explanation. And finally, making vague arguments. Just stating oversight or financial difficulties without that forensic proof we've been talking about, those are almost guaranteed to be rejected.
And this really sums it all up. At the end of the day, the burden of proof is 100% on you. A successful waiver is not about getting lucky. It's about meticulous preparation, thorough documentation, and a clear, compelling story. So as we wrap up, I'll leave you with this final thought. Navigating a missed RMD waiver is a great defensive play, but a missed RMD is also a symptom. So what's the cure? Is your retirement plan truly robust enough to prevent these mistakes from happening in the first place? That's the most important question of all.